Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. Don, I think this is your fault. You should use this next hour or however long this episode will be to take some responsibility for the current red candle on the screen because you dared utter the cursed phrase or imply it that the market was going to decouple or decorrelate or de-something, and it didn't. And we know that's a cursed phrase, yet you so nonchalantly decided to employ it. In your defense, listen, one thing I will add in your favor is that there were some impossibly bearish signals that lined up with your callous statement. Specifically, first of all, there are two things. Altcoin Thursdays came out, and that video is just a disaster. I even tried to avoid the curse by not talking about specific altcoins. So, look, the market's at resistance, so let's just talk about lockout trends and altcoins and how to trade those. So I tried to make it educational. Didn't work. The curse was too powerful. And then ETH Denver happened. And you and I both know that for all these quants looking for tiny edges, running regressions, looking for alpha, whatever, that's a terrible idea. The conference alpha is so strong in crypto. Doesn't matter where it is, Miami, Texas, Denver. It's like such a bearish catalyst since like 2017 and probably before, that whenever you got that, so you got this kind of triune attack on the market of Altcoin Thursdays comes out, ETH Denver starts off with some cringe we're going to watch as well, and then Donna's like, oh, Bitcoin's like a beach ball being held underwater, whatever, and then this is what we get. So what do you have to say for yourself?
I mean, the thing is, it decorrelated, right? The S&P went up, it's just Bitcoin went down.
Yeah. Relative strength is the one we focus on. Relative weakness we just ignore. That's how we do things around here.
Yeah, but obviously not great. I think I missed was there like banking news that I missed? Because I've been on travels and I heard that there was like banking stuff.
I don't think there's stuff with Silvergate, which we'll discuss in the news section. So, you know, basically that was the bank of choice for a lot of crypto companies, including the now blown up insolvent ones. And so they had a crypto bank run on them from their partners, like all these exchanges just nuking their relationships with Silvergate. And they didn't file one of their regulatory forms that would show their income and assets and so on and so forth. But the timing of that didn't like one-to-one align with the dump itself. So I'm hard pressed to argue that it's just like a straight up a catalyst dump, as in bad news came out and then the market dumped. I don't think that was the causal chain, but it was certainly one of the things floating around alongside the Mt. Gox coins and ETH Shanghai, and but I still think it's Altcoin Thursdays and ETH Denver. Those have much more explanatory power, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it doesn't get much more bearish than that one. I mean, I saw the video of ETH Denver and I was like, okay.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, I'm just going to open it up very quickly. So, by the way, why can't these crypto conferences just be normal, man? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just have a normal conference. You don't need some cringe, furry, musical performance, I don't know, impromptu nonsense. Just have a conference, man. So many smart people there. So many ways to do it right. But literally every single conference, Don, has some nonsense that gets posted on Twitter. And everyone's like, oh, this is why I don't go. I just don't understand.
I've been hearing people say that it's nice that it's not like sooty and whatever, that it's like a little bit different. But I mean, you can be a little bit different and still be taken serious, right?
Yes.
And then you can do whatever this is. So
yeah. So just for our audience, just very quickly, I'll play like 10 seconds of this. Oh, I don't know if the audio is coming through. Yes, it is. So as you can tell, there's a picture of Suzu and Kyle, and there's Do Kwon there as well, and there's like a song based on how they scammed and how bad they are and they should go to hell, etc. A picture of Vitalik on a horse. The lyrics says like "fuck SBF," Kyle and Suzu, Do Kwon, Mashinsky, and then. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a bit much, I think. Not that those people then deserve the criticism they get, but to have I want to move past it as far as reasonably possible, right? Sort of, you know, the exciting things happening with ETH developmentally, and we all know how bad last year was. I think sort of dwelling on it to that cringe extent for intended comedic effects, I don't know. Maybe I'm just becoming too cynical and jaded. But I remember going to Consensus last year, and it just felt like 2018 ICO era. Like I've told this story before, right? I go to the main conference bit, and there are dozens of projects there, and I maybe recognize 20% of them. And the rest are just these new startup Web3 DAO NFT infrastructure nonsense stuff that went to zero, presumably. So yeah, these conferences, there's alpha there. You and I remember talking about like consensus pump in like 2018, right?
Oh yeah, good times.
Yeah, so these things aren't great. Which leads us to the current sort of market structure. What do you think of 22.3 or the size of this move or how it's looking at the moment? Obviously, we don't have any of the higher time frame closes yet. So the weekly still has the weekend to go. The daily hasn't. I mean, this is the impulse day. It happened in the overnight session, but no daily close. Just trading below the last little consolidation. You were a fan of the box cluster thing at like 22.7ish, right? That sort of mid-range level. That was basically the bottom for a while, and now less so. So do you have an updated view, or is this like whatever the send it to 30K?
I mean, I want to see how the daily is going to close today. Looks pretty shitty because it's trading also below the range high, right, which is 22.5. That's not too far away, so we can still close above it and look okay-ish. But I mean, that's the first hurdle, and then we basically have to break through that support that we used to have that is now resistance, and then it starts looking better again. But until then, it's just like kind of meh. And in general, and this is like I mentioned this on Twitter a couple of times. This is why I sold in the first place back at like 25K. Is we closed the monthly at resistance, right? And we haven't talked about this yet, I think, on the show. But last month basically closed completely flat, still under resistance, and that's technically like a bearish thing. And then we also have on the weekly the close at resistance, which has been leading to a pullback. So it's not great on all fronts, especially if the daily doesn't push up a little bit more. So technical wise, not great. Gut feeling wise, I still think we're going to go up a little bit. But if all the technicals disagree, I mean, I'm going to get out of the way, I think. We'll see. I mean, I'm not home right now. I'm still in the hotel. I'm gonna be home by tomorrow evening, and then I'll reassess. But right now, it's not looking too nice on the TA front, I think.
Finally, Don, the monthly FUD is back. Because I saw people shitting on monthly time frame levels on Twitter and stuff, or the monthly time frame. I just don't understand it. It's just such a good time frame, you know. Like,
it's the best.
Even if you don't like the idea of like waiting a month and the candle close, etc. Like, first of all, you don't have to. But second of all, even if you just ignore that use case completely and focus on the monthly levels themselves and sort of trading them on lower time frames if you want, like it's just a good time frame, you know. I think you made the argument that it has a very low sort of fake out rate when it comes to closes and that type of stuff. So the monthly time frame disrespectors are in shambles, I think, is the only way to describe it.
Yeah, but they wouldn't even know it because it's not the time horizon isn't really as like big enough.
That's
I
true.
think that's like the people that are shit talking the monthly, they basically don't even look at it because I mean you'd have to be blind to kind of shit talk that. I think. So it's basically just like, haha, look at these people. They're not trading the 5-minute chart, which fair enough.
I was about to make that joke. I was like, if I were trading $100 on the 5-minute time frame, then I wouldn't care about the monthly either, you know?
Exactly.
Since we're on this time frame, I think first of all, is Technical Roundup aged well, the newsletter. We didn't even put one out last week. So like, what do you want us to say? It's at resistance and it hasn't moved from resistance. So for us to have new views would be weird almost, right? But the point we made there was where all the closes, so the monthly was closing below monthly resistance and the weekly was closing below weekly resistance. It's kind of like, what do you want us to do, right? Like resistance is resisting. If we stick to the monthly time frame for a moment, if this gives us a visible pullback, I mean, it's starting to a little bit. We're at least below the monthly open, but at the moment, it's still an inside month, right? We haven't violated last month's low or anything like that. It's an inside month, granted, in the first 3 days of that candle, so there is time for that. But whenever / if it happens, the visible pullback level is presumably still that monthly cluster at 20K in one form or another, right? That single green candle. Men will make huge bets on single candles on the monthly time frames that are going to therapy type of setup. Look, one of the arguments you made is that you don't want to see larger pullbacks, and the idea of 30k is to some extent premised on a rally which is just, so one-sided and so absent pullbacks that participants are essentially forced to chase breakouts because otherwise they don't get an entry. So if that's true, then you might end up in a tricky position. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, where technically speaking, the pullback to 20k is like a really good one because it's a clear level of support. But in terms of how it affects your thesis, it makes it less compelling because, hey, this was the pullback we weren't supposed to get, and now we're getting it. How do you navigate that friction between FOMO rally and if we do get a pullback, it is to support at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think if we go to support, basically the whole FOMO rally could transform into just like a structural thing. Basically, I think if we went to 20k, maybe we would bounce, but I think it would take quite a while.
Right.
And then if we spend some time between 20 and 23 for like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months,
I'm not
then the
ready for that,
structure.
Don.
I don't think anyone's ready for
Right.
that. Everyone would be hating it. And I mean, volumes and kind of like the liquidity been kind of dwindling, and price action's been odd to say the least. So I mean, no one would enjoy that, I think. But then you would have a more kind of structural argument. But yeah, I think the FOMO rally thesis at that point would be dead. So we're kind of at this point, especially on the daily right now, where we're still trading above the lows that were set on 13th of February. It's basically the higher low.
Yes.
As long as we're trading above there, technically speaking, there's no real reason to be panicking. But if we start kind of like properly going under that, I could see this transform into something completely else, which would basically just be like a massive rally, massive rally. That no, a massive range.
You're so bullish, you can't even say it, Don. Like, spit it out.
No, but I think that's kind of the most likely outcome at that point. Like if we break that low, I think it would make sense to spend quite a bit of time in that area before kind of choosing whether it wants to go up or down. Which is not as nice as the FOMO rally, because the FOMO rally gives more trades, I think, because you can have a FOMO rally into resistance and get rejected and then have the structure built up and then have a proper trade there. But yeah, we'll see. Right now, I still have hope, but technicals are starting to shift. Good thing is that like we started being bullish in the 16k range, so that's still quite a bit away. So if I have to flip neutral, I'm gonna flip neutral and take profits, and it's okay.
I appreciate your extremely charitable use of "we" at 16k. That's very kind of you. Yeah, fine. That makes total sense. The only time frame we didn't speak about is the weekly, but I think there's a ton to add there, right? Just like the
Yeah.
monthly is getting stuffed at the top of the range, the weekly got stuffed at the top of the range, and I don't really like the last, like you see those two down candles before the one big green week we had into resistance. I'm not a huge fan of that as a structure or as anything really. It just seemed like consolidation, and it's not like a level, like we didn't get past it far enough for me to consider it a cluster, right? Like if we broke out properly from that 2 week down candle range, I would say, well, look, that this is like one of those impulse consolidate impulse type of structures that might be worth rebuying. But we kind of just got stuffed too close to where a breakout would take place if there were one. And so
Yes.
to me, I kind of just defer to the monthly when it comes to where is the pullback support. And it is also a weekly level, kind of 20k-ish, but I'm just talking in terms of like what's close to the market right now at like 21, 22, at least on the weekly time frame, to me is not particularly interesting or compelling, especially compared to what else is on offer. Do you think so too?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have support at 21 on the weekly, but we front ran it, so I don't like it anymore. And I like the lower ones, and it's the same like with the resistance. We just got smacked by the resistance, and any of that pullback before that, I wouldn't technically count as support. Like, I mean,
Sure.
you could box it out and be like, oh yeah, this is where buying previously happened, but it was so quick and it was just a completely different type of buying, in my opinion, that it just doesn't make much sense. So we're in the middle of nowhere, basically having been rejected by resistance, and we don't really have the luxury of the monthly being in our favor either. And the daily, like I said, has to do some work as well. I have hope still, but that's like not the best combination of things, I think.
You know, the words cope and hope are dangerously close to each other, Don. Don't know if you've considered that. That makes sense. And yeah, just to kind of summarize, given we've gone through the timeframes, on the daily, at a minimum, you want to see that cluster reclaimed, right? And sort of operation rescue the daily time frame. So at least don't make a lower low and keep the higher low from February and the sort of
Yes.
pre-Valentine's Day candle when all of us were trading. And then as a positive sign to get above the cluster and sort of retrace this Asia dump candle, basically.
Yeah, I basically wanted to go back to my
Just
break
pretend
even
last
from
night didn't happen.
exactly.
I've had
I
that
want
thought a
to.
lot in my life, trust me.
Oh yeah.
I'm lying, I
um,
haven't. In any case.
but yeah, I want to. Basically, I mean, I bought 23K support right after selling 25, and I basically want that reclaimed. Not
Yeah.
because it's not necessarily because it's my break even. That's kind of nice on that recent trade anyway, but because it's the area I think that was basically support before, and that just has to. If this kind of comes back above it, it starts to look really good, really fast. I think like anything above 23.5, 23.6. Like if we reclaim this recent dump, it looks really, really good, I think. But until that happens, like if you're cautious, I think it makes sense to kind of just wait for that, I guess,
Sure.
and then see where it goes. But I think in general, like if we go back above 23.6, that looks good. Anything before that, it's not that nice.
Yeah, it's like all of these levels in the mid 20s just so close to monthly resistance, you know? Like you just don't feel
Yes.
that comfortable because like, well, if the monthly expands, then all of these nearby levels are fucked, and I'll feel like an idiot for not waiting for the deeper ones, you know?
Mhm.
That's always the difficulty I've had. I'm like, oh, this is a decent level, and then it's like 3% away from like a monthly or weekly level. And like if this level even half does its job, I'm fucked, you know? And
Yep.
I don't like being in that position. Fine, well that makes sense. Let's see if ETH Weekly has has won any favors with us, Don, given the amount of smack we've talked about it. And I think the answer kind of has to be no still for the time being,
Nope.
because it's still within the same basically 5 week consolidation, hasn't moved. The monthly, yeah, as you mentioned at the beginning, we didn't have a chance to talk about like all the closes and stuff, given the timeline of the show. It closed at monthly resistance as well, right? Sort of similar view to BTC, where it got up to that 1680 range high, and not like a nasty rejection candle by any means, but the way I kind of articulated it in Monday markets, like, you know, if you want to look at, oh, did it close above, did it close below, is it a bullish close or bearish close, you can start with a much simpler analysis, which is this a breakout candle? You know, like, is this a breakout candle that's suggesting higher time frame sort of trend expansion and a move through this range? And I think the answer is no, right? From what we have given the monthly close, and that level has just been working. So the monthly is being capped, just like Bitcoin. Monthly is capped for the time being. The weekly time frame is like an insult to my intelligence and appreciation of charts. So like this, I refuse to get baited into caring about the 1500 to 1600 range. It's one of the worst, I think, weekly periods I can remember on ETH. I disavow it, and I want nothing to do with it. I think, as we wrote in Technical Roundup, the only useful thing the weekly can give is away from here if it goes closer to sort of 1400, which is that prior all-time high and weekly range low and that type of stuff. Anything that doesn't start to essentially retrace the full weekly momentum candle is the last hope, higher low for ETH. I don't know if you've got any views on the daily. I mean, this thing just looks mega choppy, except the chop is taking place while closing below and trading around monthly resistance, which is unhelpful to say the least. I think if you want to be really charitable, you can carve out a daily range of sorts, which I've attempted to do, from like the lowest close after the mega pump, like the 18th of January lowest close, and then the highest close just a couple of days later at sort of 1600, 1700. If you use that, it's been okay. Like, it's been finding resistance like around the highs and support around the lows, and the midpoint up until recently was fine. But I feel like even that's reaching. You know, I'd rather stick to the simple conclusions where they're available, which is that this is just struggling at monthly resistance, and that's more or less it. If I want to start hallucinating ranges on the daily time frame, I can do so, but with much lower certainty than the higher time frame view. And it sucks that the weekly, which is usually such a great time frame, is about as useful as Anne Frank's drum kit on this occasion. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't like the ETH chart at all. Like any time frame is just
Every
garbage.
week.
One thing I want to say though is that ETH BTC is surprising me. It's like, I mean, realistically, the dump that we've had overnight wasn't really that big, right? On anything, it's just like a like 3 or 4 or 5% nuke on Bitcoin, which isn't really that big. But you would expect ETH to kind of outperform to the downside, as in like, or underperform basically. And it's not really been doing that, right? If you just look at the ETH BTC daily candle, um, it's kind of been starting to go up, and you would have expected that to be erased by the Bitcoin action. And so far, it hasn't done any of that. So I could actually see this start outperforming again just based on that. Um, but obviously, if that's into Bitcoin weakness, that's just going to be short lived. So Bitcoin actually needs to do a little bit of work. But I think if it does reclaim and goes to 23.6, like I said, ETH might actually be the better bet, just based on that strength. I've not really been seeing too much things that would keep me away from ETH. And I've been saying like it's gonna be bad for like altcoins in the next in like this entire rally basically, and that's been true for the most part anyway. And I think if ETH holds on like this and Bitcoin actually shows some strength, which right now it's not looking like it, but if it does, I think ETH might be a good bet. So I'm looking closely at ETH. I'm ready to kind of rotate into it if Bitcoin should surprise, um, and then see if I can get like a larger leg on ETH if I'm getting any strength from Bitcoin. But as long as I don't, I think you have to expect it to go lower. But I'm seeing some hopeful signs on the ETH BTC front.
You'll be using the ETH weekly chart on the dollar pair to time those precise entries with the amazing levels afforded there, obviously. Yeah, no, that's interesting. That makes sense. I think at a certain point, we'll have to really question our priors as to, well, Bitcoin dumps, ETH dumps harder, and, Bitcoin pumps, ETH pumps harder, and cyclically, ETH bottom is much lower than BTC in relative percentage terms, and,
Yeah.
ETH BTC outperformance in terms of where it takes place cycle to cycle. Like in a bear market, it gets battered. Bull market, it does really well. In the downtrend, it does worse. Like a lot of this stuff has held up since 2017 or since we started like properly trading. But even the fact that ETH BTC has been in this multi-year range, given what happened to our industry, that in itself is a form of outperformance that we're not used to, right? So
Yes. And
it
just
seems
look
like
at the
there's a
ETH.
market structure shift there.
Yeah, sorry. Look at the ETH BTC monthly chart. It's just absurd. Like this is like it's an absurd chart.
Yeah, it's silly, isn't it?
And it doesn't look weak. Like that's not a weak looking chart. That's like a chart that wants to make new highs, in my opinion.
It's like,
It's
show me
just a
on the
question of
chart where the
when.
industry blew up,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. It's like show me on the chart where like FTX went to zero, where like all of the shit happened that we had in the last year or so, and you cannot. Like, there's nothing. It's just been holding steady with Bitcoin, and that's impressive because Bitcoin went through multiple things, right? Bitcoin went through a massive dump stage where Bitcoin went from 69 to 15,000, and it also bounced hard from 15,000 to 25. Um, and ETH's just been doing nothing. And when something doesn't do anything while it's chilling at resistance for a year, after it's been outperforming the entirety of the bull market, that's interesting, right? That's something that I am not comfortable with being bearish on. So I think it's going to be an interesting one, and it's a question of when is this going to break new highs rather than if. I think. So yeah, I wanna have some more ETH. It's just a question of when, because I don't want to buy it before it goes down 20%. And the worst thing is if you buy it and it goes down 20% against Bitcoin, and Bitcoin goes down 20%, you're not having any fun. So yeah, you have to be a little bit selective about it. But I think this right now is like a good point where both Bitcoin and ETH have to show a little bit of strength, and then it starts looking quite cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. It's good in that regard that we've had this dump, because if we reclaim it, it's another sign of, okay, this just wants to continue, and if we don't, it's a sign that we need to cool off. And if we need to cool off, that could take a couple months. So I think this situation right now is quite important, and the next few days are quite important. It's gonna be a big week,
It's
basically.
going to be a big week. Yeah, we probably seem like very either unreasonable or senile to people when we're like talking about ETH BTC and saying, "Oh, look how impressive this thing has been," given it like hasn't done anything. But again, our reference point is how it's unfolded over previous cycles, where it would just like as soon as the market got bearish, ETH is the first to get chucked out the window. Like obviously the shitcoin goes first, and then like Bitcoin was the reserve currency of the crypto space, if you will, and obviously the highest market cap. But like ETH's liquidity profile in like bear markets and just how aggressively it would get yeeted when there are forced sellers, like that thing was something to behold, right? You can just look at sort of previous cycles corrections as to where Bitcoin bottomed and where ETH bottomed from like top to bottom. We had a base case that that's kind of how it would look, right? The ETH would do far worse. So the fact that it's just done nothing is itself, oddly enough, a relative sign of strength. It's just if you don't have that history, it seems like we're sort of exaggerating because all it's done is done nothing. But doing nothing compared to what it used to do is like in itself an impressive feat.
And especially given the rally that it had before, right? Because you wouldn't expect cool down in anything after, like against Bitcoin, right? From the bottom to the top, it went up 440, 450%, right? And there was no pullback. It went 450% against something that went up a shitload, and there was zero pullback. And then it hasn't had that pullback yet. And that just seems like
Yet.
something. Yeah, but I think you could get a push and then the pullback, right? Basically setting the same thing that Bitcoin did, where it made a new high at 69K and then broke down. I could see the same with ETH, where you make a new high. I don't think ETH is necessarily gonna, like, if you get the whole flippening thing, I don't think that's gonna maintain. I think that's gonna be bearish, but I think you could get it, and then that's going to be the top, I think, for ETH BTC if we get it. So
Yeah, wouldn't that be hilarious? Like thus far, every time the markets started talking about a flippening, it's been just the local top for everything. And then if it actually happens, it's like, yeah, we finally did it. It's like, that's probably also a top signal. Like, there's no way to win, Also, how much of a meme is it that BTC topped at 69K?
Oh,
Like,
it's
are you
quite
serious?
funny,
Like, the numerologists are just having a great time in the Matrix, because the rest of us pure mortals should just submit to the numbers game. But, there is a sort of interesting point to be made here that when this stuff just starts to turbo moon and it's in, I know this is like using the term incorrectly and all the purists hate it, so I'm going to use it. Price discovery.
Yes.
Like no one knows what the fuck is going on, right? Especially if it's like easy money, quantitative easing, zero rates, etc., bull market. Like no one has any idea how to value these things. I mean, even if you did, you'd have to override it just because of the massive inflows versus outflows disparity and the amount of momentum that's generating, and then the amount of people speculating on that and how cheap credit and leverage is in the system. Like all those things, your fundamentals go out the bloody window at that point, right? It's like momentum, reflexivity, liquidations, and sort of microstructure driven more than anything else. So when you end up in those types of scenarios, like no one has any idea how to value this thing or when to sell it, how to take profit, what are the levels, and so on and so forth. Like we're all guessing, we're all grasping at straws to figure something out, and that's why I think our bull market price action trading toolkit, a lot of it comes down to like, oh well, this is like a round number, or here's like a fib extension I pulled out my ass, and this stuff starts to work because nothing else is working. We're all making it up as we go along, and if enough people believe the fairy tale, it starts to have like a noticeable impact. We even saw the same in the S&P, right? Like a lot of the guys I used to follow used to trade the Chicago pits, and like guys who've been around for 30, 40 years. When stuff was nuking during the sort of 2020 liquidity crash, they were all just drawing lines on charts, long trend lines, horizontal levels, and these are guys who usually trade much more sophisticated instruments. And it's basically the concession that, hey, everything is broken, it might as well go back to caveman basics, rub some sticks together to make a fire because there's no electricity type of thing, which is super interesting.
Yeah, I love that, and you saw it in all markets basically.
Yes.
Because all the sophisticated guys got liquidated basically.
Yes.
And the stupid line draws actually flourished for once. I don't think it's necessarily the best to trade traditional markets this way. But in those circumstances, it just works, right? Like if everyone has no clue how to value something, I mean, lines on the chart just make sense. Not because it makes sense inherently, but because there's just nothing else, right? Like if you have nothing else, you're just gonna use whatever you can find. And
Yes.
I mean, when you think about it, religion in the like thousands and thousands of years ago, like if you cannot explain something, it was a god, right? And I mean, it's the same thing now where you cannot explain these kind of moves because all your models break. And then what is it? Well, it's a fucking stupid line on the chart. And that
Yeah,
kind of just
overbought,
works.
oversold, that type. And the thing is, we're not making this up. Like we spoke to CMS on the show and a bunch of other guys. We'd ask them, when shit hits the fan, what do you do? Like, oh, a lot of the time we just turn off our stuff and trade it manually.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, welcome to my world. My stuff is always turned off. Fine. All of that makes a lot of sense. Any altcoins have your interest? It's the usual type of behavior where Bitcoin's down 4 or 5. A lot of these altcoins were down double digits earlier. Lido might give you a dip if you're still interested in that or been waiting. It's kind of been stall-ish on its weekly breakout. It's at least a red weekly at the 270 level. Litecoin is continuing to suffer at the hand of my $100 Pico top generational, never to be seen again resistance. Cred horizontal SR video enjoyers are eating well. But yeah, when we talked about that thing where it's like above 100 looks good. If you need to round trip down to 76 or something, fine, so be it. Presumably no changes there. Any others have your attention in terms of, stuff is red, I might as well slurp?
I mean, I cannot. I'm not home. So I've not really been looking too much. One thing that I found interesting is Wi-Fi has just been insane. Like that's been just outperforming massively. I think that could, like that's gonna be one that's gonna be hot. Doesn't have to mean that it's gonna go up or down, but I think that's the one to look for trades probably. I mean, we've seen the same with Lido, right? A couple weeks back. Basically, when you have these massive nukes or when you have big moves, anything that kind of behaves in an odd way is usually the pair that's gonna get traded. So I think Wi-Fi is one to be looked at. Other than that, one thing that I find really funny is that EOS up a shitload, and yeah, that's an odd one.
Great sign, right?
Yeah, always lovely when I see EOS rallying. And that one actually doesn't have the worst setup in the world, but I could not bring myself to buy it, so I'm just gonna ignore that it's going up, both for the sake of my bags, because EOS rallying is usually not good,
Right.
and also because I'm just not gonna buy it. But those are the notable ones that I've seen, that are just like where I'm like, okay, there might be something there. Other than that, I think almost everything is behaving as expected, basically.
Yes.
So I don't really have interest in anything really. I mean, I have the ones that I want to have, and I'm probably not going to reposition anything drastically before at least Monday. So if you ask me again on Monday, I'll have a different answer because then I've had a weekend to kind of sit. But yeah, are you seeing anything that's interesting right now?
I mean, you know better than to ask me about altcoins. We've seen what happens every Thursday when I try to talk about them. I'm not sure, for the sake of your bags and your break even, no more questions like this. Nothing particularly interesting. Again, to me, the majors are just too close to monthly and weekly resistance. And also, we're now getting some evidence of that higher time frame rotation actually kicking in, right? Like we're seeing some evidence of an actual impulse and stuff moving. So if I start slurping alts, and it basically it lands me in the same scenario that I outlined that I don't like being in, where I basically get steamrolled by the high time frame rotation because I traded levels that were too close to the monthly levels, So that's not terribly compelling to me. I think some of them are at decent enough kind of do or die retest levels, like DYDX is close enough. GRT on the weekly is close enough. A couple of the ones you mentioned also structurally, Lido coming close to that range high. OP is stuck in that range, basically broke out and then did nothing, right? And it's kind of established a new range between 240 and 340. So
it actually looks like an ascending triangle, and I know it's a meme, but on the daily time frame, I actually like the look of it
coming
now.
soon.
I mean, during bull markets, you can do this. It's just a question of, is it actually a bull market or not? Probably not, but
Find out next week when Don tweets.
I do like the look of that though. LP.
It's been strong,
quite an
yeah.
interesting
It's
one.
been strong. It's just this new. I was expecting a bit more fireworks, I guess, when it made that first higher low after breaking out from the consolidation. But all it's done is make a new range, basically, between $3 and whatever, 230, 240. But yeah, I mean, some of them are interesting levels. I think again for short to medium term trading, you don't need to care too much, especially for short term trading, like where exactly the next big rotation for BTC and ETH is going to be, because you'll be kind of out of the market for those trades by the time it happens. But I'm not in that type of mode, so I still care more about BTC and ETH than the other stuff. So yeah, I think you just got to give it some space, right? I think that's what the higher time frames have kind of been indicating for the last couple of weeks, that hey, we're at resistance, and yeah, it's we're not going to make it easy, essentially.
Yes.
And I have all the respect in the world for monthly levels, you know. Even when you were doubting them, Don, I was resolute in my commitment. And by commitment, I mean cope, but I'm going to say commitment because it makes me sound more credible.
Oh yeah, it sounds good.
Excellent. Should we do some news? I think that's enough for charts. I think the summary there is high time frames are stuffing us. Take it back to Don's break even and then listen to him on Monday or something. Like that's the bastardized version.
And if it doesn't go to my break even, don't listen to me on Monday.
yes. You'll know. You'll see on the chart.
Yes.
Awesome. For the news stuff, I mean, we talked about the ETH Denver conference, which was something. Also, I don't want to speak too ill about these things because I think they're important for our ecosystem, a lot of them, especially the more serious ones. Not by serious, I don't mean like suit ones. I just mean non-cringe random Web3 NFT meetup. You know, like the ETH one's a pretty big deal. Consensus back in the day, NFT NYC is always a fun time, especially for this line of work where a lot of your friends and peers, etc., are international and everyone works remotely and you're in your own cave, grinding, trading, doing whatever, and it's all very metaverse oriented. It's really nice to just get out and hang out with people and meet your friends, you know. So the fact that I'm passively chatting shit about a random song and dance done at ETH Denver, that's not to say that you shouldn't go to these conferences and meet up with friends and arrange stuff, because it's been very a net positive and rewarding experience to meet the people you shitpost with all day, and most of them turn out to be pretty fine, you know, like functional enough human beings so far, at least.
So you're not talking about me then?
No, not in the slightest, not at all. Silvergate's network unravels, leaving crypto industry in search of new partners. I mean, the Silvergate stock, I don't know if you've looked at that chart.
Yes.
It basically went to zero, right?
That's right. Yes,
that thing doesn't look very, well, Don, on the monthly, if it reclaims $9 after a 2x, you know, like... But yeah, this is just the crypto bank of choice for a lot of the crypto. I mean, look, the simple argument is, like, this was the banking partner for a lot of the titans in the crypto industry. All the titans were frauds and got wrecked, and understandably, their preferred banking partner isn't feeling too well. You know, I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that necessarily.
Yeah, I think they took a huge hit with FTX.
Yes.
I think that's basically it.
And Bitslato, right? The
of course.
in the room.
But I mean, that we don't even need to talk about. That's always implied.
It's always in the room. It affects all the flows at any time.
Yes, but they just took a huge hit there, and that seems to have caused quite a bit of problems down the road. And I mean, losing crypto banks is not nice, especially given we don't have many. So it's a little bit of a worrying trend that we keep on losing them one by one. I liked it when there was a lot, because then it's harder to shut all of them down, right? Now, a lot of them have been shut down. It's not that much left anymore. And that's like a proper kind of, I think that's proper FUD, basically, because if you lose all the banks, crypto cannot really exist on its own. I mean,
actually, according to Jeff Dorman, we just become carnival players or whatever. So that's actually really bullish, Don. You know, if you can't.
I mean, that's a clown take. We already agreed on that.
That's true. No, I agree. The banking stuff sucks. From my understanding, a lot of the funds and stuff have moved on to Signature Bank, and there's like still something going on. But I agree, we need more robust and sort of decentralized infrastructure in terms of banking partners, because otherwise it's just like one at a time. Like everyone's with Silvergate. It's like Silvergate dies. Okay, roll with Signature now, and yeah, that's probably not the best solution
No,
in the
you
world.
want to have like as many as you can, and then if one
Yes.
goes down, it's the same with the exchanges in crypto, really, right?
Yes.
You want to have as many as possible because I mean, it is just always a chance that whatever you're trading on just kind of disappears. It's been from the get-go basically like this. I mean, even with Mt. Gox, and the more you have, the more choice you have, the more you can spread out, and it's the same with the banks, right?
Yes.
If they all go, that's just not good.
Apparently that's a controversial view, Don. So very brave of you for holding it. But yeah, Silvergate. I mean, also just like as a bank losing money in this interest rate environment is like kind of hilarious. I mean, I understand the specifics in this case, given it was just crypto, crypto industry banking partner, and the industry went to zero, so obviously the banking partner suffers as well. But it's been a pretty good time for banks in general.
Yes.
But yeah, everyone seemingly has moved along. Basically, there was a big, like everyone just cut their relations with Silverbank publicly in the whole day. Coinbase, Circle, Paxos, and Gemini were among several companies that publicly say they were severing ties with the bank on some level. Yeah, so I mean, rip Silvergate as well, because presumably their incumbent edge was that they would bank all these crypto companies and be their fiat on and off ramp, and this is just basically their entire business disappearing. So yeah.
And I mean, it's good business, right? Especially in days where you get like 5% for doing nothing.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's insane, right? Like if you think how much of money they get for nothing, basically.
Yes.
I mean, the bank should be scrambling to get all of this crypto money, but obviously regulation, and especially given America's just been so unfriendly,
Yes.
there's a little bit of headwind there, but
And reputational risk as well, right? After the last year, it's like, yeah, good luck with your risk management department telling them you're holding a bunch of crypto custody money, and then the only thing they can think of is like FTX, basically. So that's going to be
fucking
a tough
FTX.
start.
Yeah, it's so
FTX.
stupid, man.
Yeah, ridiculous. Almost as absurd as Bitslato. 2 in 1 year, two titans like that. I still can't get over it. Senators demand info from Binance and US Arm, citing eerily similar FTX structure claims. So again, the politicians and the regulators coming in after the fact a lot of the time, as they do. 3 US senators want more information from Binance and its US subsidiary after raising questions about the parallels that might exist around the commingling that occurred between the failed FTX exchange and its sister trading firm, Alameda. And, a statement from one of the senators, the assertion that Binance US is fully independent is eerily similar to claims SBF made regarding the distinction between FTX US and FTX, claims that appear to be false. And obviously, I mean, Elizabeth Warren loves a bit of this, so she's in it. Chris Van Hollen and Roger Marshall wrote in a letter sent to Binance on Wednesday demanding more information on Binance and Binance US operations. And this was something we covered a couple of weeks ago as well. There are Reuters report that CZ authorized the withdrawal of 400 mil from a Binance US account with Silvergate Bank to transfer to an investment fund he runs, raising questions about whether Binance US is actually an independent entity, so on and so forth. I get it. I get the angle, but I just don't think people realize the nature of the FTX Alameda relationship. FTX was just basically, I don't know, Alameda's stomping ground, for lack of a better term, first, and then like an exchange second, in terms of just like the risk they took on and what was facilitated for Alameda via FTX. Like as far as I'm aware, there's no like shadow hedge fund working with Binance, which also is super collateralized in BNB and has a no liquidation account and all the insider stuff, all the nonsense that we know happened between Alameda and FTX now. So like if with a very surface level analysis, you can say, oh well, especially because it doesn't help that Sam is fucking blaming CZ for this stuff as well, which is just completely egregious, but gets the attention of the regulators and politicians and so on and so forth. So if you're going to do a cursory analysis, you're like, oh, well, this is the other big exchange and let's look into it, essentially. But the main distinguishing factor is the existence and the operation of Alameda Research on FTX. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing comparable or similar to Binance, in Binance rather. So the analogy isn't as kind of straightforward as I think a lot of people want it to be. Because, basically what happens is when one big ugly thing happens and there's one collapse, you just start looking for patterns of it everywhere else, right?
Yes.
You kind of become psychologically primed to look for it. And I just think a lot of the tail chasing that was happening towards the end of last year was looking for echoes of FTX elsewhere. And there were plenty of them. That doesn't mean all of them were running the same type of operation.
Yeah, I think I mean, it makes sense. I cannot even fault anyone for doing this because, I mean, you see something crazy happening in a space, you're like, what else is there, right? Let's just look into it. But they could also look into the fact that, I mean, the SEC's just been not doing their work. There's a lot of things that they could be looking into, but obviously it's just, yeah, I don't know. Like it's cloud chasing, basically, seeing if like finding something new, whatever. It just seems a lot, especially with the enforcement action going on right now. It's just embarrassing, left, right, and center. I think,
Yes.
but I cannot say we don't deserve it, right?
Right.
So
And
as an
also,
industry, obviously, like every individual in crypto doesn't deserve it, but the
yes,
industry as a
exactly.
whole, I mean, this just keeps on happening, and yeah, it's just sad.
You got to
And
reap
so
what you
I
sow at a certain point, right?
yes, exactly. So it's hard to be too angry, I think. If
Yeah.
anything, it's easy to be angry at the people in crypto rather than the people outside of it, because really, what did we expect after this, right? I mean, we talked about it back in the day, and we're like, the fallout of this is um gonna be one that we're gonna deal with for years, and I still
Yes.
think this is true. And it's gonna be a long time until we kind of look good in the eyes of regulation, if any, like if that's ever going to happen, because obviously crypto isn't an industry that is necessarily regulator friendly.
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole point of it. So, like, if you do this bullshit and then you're kind of like you're kind of like fuck the system, do your own thing, and then you have these kind of things happen. I mean, it's not surprising, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I unfortunately agree with that. The sad thing is, like for example, like Binance is the biggest exchange and number one by market share and all reasonable measures at this point. They just get all this additional scrutiny now because of the FTX blow up, and because following the FTX blowout, Sam was just blaming CZ for everything. So they're getting extra scrutiny, but that has negative downstream effects, because now I saw CZ tweeting earlier that like, oh, maybe we just should pull out of the Voyager deal, because there is also regulatory objection to them basically bidding on Voyager.
Yeah.
And then that's just more fuckery for Voyager customers. Mate, the people on, like, the Voyager customers are on the shittiest roller coaster ever invented. It's literally the euthanasia roller coaster at this point, They've been, like, bailed out and unbailed out and fucked and unfucked, like, 500 times at this point. And
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem to stop. It's like, it's purgatory. That's what it is.
It's horrendous, really. Like, what is that? I mean, it's kind of sad because they would be helped, right? If this whole thing was just a little bit less of like a clusterfuck, they would be. I mean, the customers of Voyages are the one suffering under this, and not necessarily Binance. I don't think it's the worst in the world if they don't get this deal for them. So yeah, don't really think that the kind of like the scrutiny that they're going to get for it is something that necessarily makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, like, when you become number one and basically have no competition in terms of percentage terms, you're going to get all the scrutiny in the world, right? So,
Yes.
I'm sure they're prepared to deal with that. But also, it's just, yeah, then I don't think there's been concentrated or successful efforts yet to plug the hole that was left by FTX. It's just pretty much Binance is like the biggest game in town, and it doesn't help that we're in a shitty, low volume, low liquidity bear market. Because I mean, good luck building like a customer base in this type of environment, especially if you survive, off of volume, and everyone is dead, and there's like one exchange that's liquid relative to the rest of the industry where everyone wants to trade. It's pretty tricky to lose market share in this type of environment. Maybe Binance should hire some people from Coinbase to figure out how to do that, because there's some expertise from their NFT team and some others. So there's a business strategy for you. Trader makes error in XMON unlock strategy, loses 100% of his trade in slippage. What a crazy headline, right?
I mean, that's a little bit of a slippage.
Yeah, it's just a bit, just a bit. The price we pay for market orders, am I right? So this is to do with the XMON lock drop mechanism, and he was trading it on chain, and they ended up swapping $10,000 for less than $4, as noted by Arc of Intelligence. And I think this just goes to show that. Thing is, the UI UX experience of trading on chain is getting better. It's still fraught with errors and phishing scams and all sorts of, the dark forest of MEV, which if you don't know how to circumnavigate will certainly take your money, for lack of a better term. Be that in the process of executing a trade, or you're just buying a rug because you don't know how to read smart contracts and all this other stuff. Like trading on chain is getting better. And is becoming an increasingly just viable option for people who want to participate in crypto and speculate. I think especially, and this is something I tweeted out yesterday, that if you've got like a smaller account balance and trading balance, you shouldn't be really, I think in my opinion, be spending all your time trading Bitcoin and ETH on leverage, right? Because those are the most competitive markets ever. And so all the guys who can put on a ton of size on trades and have all the infrastructure, etc., the smartest people are going to be trading those instruments with latencies and tools and infrastructure that you simply don't have access to. So the competition there is absolutely fierce. Whereas those same people have size constraints and tech constraints and security constraints and liquidity constraints and certain mandates and so on and so forth when it comes to, by definition, like less liquid opportunities, right? Like your shitcoins, your less liquid perps, NFTs, on-chain trading, yield farms and so on and so forth. It's just not the same competition. So your relatively small balance, if it applies to you, just allows you to be nimble in an area where a lot of those other more competitive players just can't compete. So at least some of your time, if not most of your time, I think should be spent in those places where you can actually be competitive. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I do agree. I think if you're kind of stuck in these, like basically in trading Bitcoin and ETH with the lows, like if you're just starting out, I mean, it's good to kind of get the right idea going and kind of learning how to do all of it. But the big multipliers, especially for kind of low balances, are elsewhere. Not necessarily the best, because I mean you also can just lose everything. But if you're like, okay, I have $100 and I want to make it big, you don't necessarily need to trade Bitcoin. And I think especially you shouldn't be trading Bitcoin on leverage or ETH on leverage. I think in general leverage is the worst way to make it. With low balances, I think at that point it's much better to kind of veer out, see what's up elsewhere, and then as in like in maybe smaller NFTs, or like you said, smaller coins, or like on chain, all that kind of stuff has much better promise, I think, and then go from there. So I totally agree with you.
But Don, my $100 at 10x turned into 1,000. Checkmate, basically. But that's how people think, right? We've beat this topic to death, so probably shouldn't do it again. But like, yeah, the whole point of leverage primarily is to. Also, that's a contradiction. I can't say whole point and then primarily. That's stupid. In any case, the primary point of leverage is to reduce your counterparty risk. So you can trade whatever your trading balance is without keeping that entire trading balance on an exchange. What people use it for instead is just to increase their bet size.
Yes, and that's wrong.
And that's how you blow up, basically.
Yeah, but blow up in a bad way.
Yes. Not like some SoundCloud rapper blow up. I mean, yeah, the bad type of blow up. To add to the March FUD, Don, Mt. Gox creditors may finally start seeing their Bitcoins this month. And then we've also got Shanghai. And then CPI is like 2 days within the Shanghai the upgrade date. So March, and also, do I need to remind you what happened March 3 years ago, Don? there's a fractal for you. It's officially a cursed month. So yeah, we've got ETH unlocks, Mt. Gox creditor stuff looming, CPI inflation stuff, and also seasonality, because we're all going to be scarred by March 2020 for the rest of our lives. So how are them apples for a month? All within a single month.
Not that great, huh?
Not that great. Yeah,
but the whole Mt. Gox thing is obviously going to take quite a while longer.
Yeah,
it's basically just a deadline to decide whether you want to be paid out early or not. Which I mean, people can think about, and it might make sense. I looked into it a little bit. Might make sense for some people, especially if you kind of want the money now, because everything else might take quite a bit longer. Then again, if you've waited this long, maybe you'll just be like, okay, I'm just going to wait another 5 years.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, all these people have become monks.
Yeah, all these people have become old.
That too.
But so I don't think that's necessarily like a pressing thing, but it's obviously a narrative, and I mean we have quite a bit of bearish narratives anyway, so it's not the nicest one to add to the list.
Yeah, agreed. But as you mentioned, this thing has been delayed so many times. It's actually unreal, the timeline of when this was supposed to happen versus when it seems to happen. And also, as far as I'm aware, and it says in this article, you need to like nominate an exchange, or there's a process related to that. Each creditor had to register with an exchange and nominate it to receive the funds on their behalf. Exchanges have given various timelines for how quickly they will process payments. So it's maybe some collusion here would be nice.
Yes.
Get these guys in a Telegram group and make sure they don't all unlock the coins on the same day, please, ma familia. But yeah, just it just doesn't help, I think, is the useful thing to draw from that. Because trying to nail
Yes.
down an exact timeline for this thing is absolutely impossible. But given the other fuckeries available this month, just add it, charge it to the game, That's showbiz, baby. Yuga Labs drops Bitcoin-based NFT collection 12-fold. I mean, what a weird synergy, right? You have Yuga, which is like sort of cutting edge, now household name NFT, ETH, so ETH centric, etc., etc. And then Bitcoin, the boomer chain, which isn't supposed to do anything and has all the ideologues, which is generally a good thing. Gets a bit annoying if you're trying to have a normal discussion, but I think for the sake of like censorship resistance, kind of need some diehard people on your side, right, for this type of project. But then they chose to basically jump onto the whole ordinals bandwagon, and now there's a Yuga NFT collection on Bitcoin. I still don't know how I feel about this. I mean, philosophically, my view is if you want to use block space, just pay for it and then use it for whatever you want, right? That just seems
Yes.
to be in line with censorship resistance principles and economics and all this other stuff. If there's some amazing down the line effect where we essentially fix Bitcoin's security model by making people use it more and not just hoard it, and whether it's NFTs or trading cards or some game or something else gimmicky, like I don't really care how we get there. However that's achieved, the outcome of fixing the security model is like an amazing outcome, and even if there's something silly attached to it or perceived as silly, as long as they're participating in the game theory of it and paying the fees for the block space, who am I to say no? And we've seen some maxis lose their head over this, talking about how it's spam or it should be filtered or this, that, and the other, which is frankly bizarre. But I would also have no issues if this didn't go anywhere. And, because at the same time as this Bitcoin NFT narrative, we're seeing sort of Bitcoin side chains and stacks and all this other stuff, Bitcoin smart contracts happen as well. So it's like some sort of technological catch-up attempt to ETH with everything that's been built on there over the last couple of years, saying, oh, look, we can try to do something similar on Bitcoin, DeFi, NFTs, and so on and so forth. If it works, I'm fine with that. Because, again, economically, we get to make a dent in the security model, which is great, or the problem associated with it, which is a positive outcome. But even if it fails, I'm fine with Bitcoin being a boring boomer chain that's just some sort of gold analog that has just a very resilient holder base and doesn't really do all too much and doesn't try to sort of, the whole like, whatever ETH can do, Bitcoin can do as well. Like, I'm fine if it doesn't. It's not a prerequisite for me that it has to have the exact same use case as ETH. I think that'd be a bit of a odd trade-off, if anything, because the ETH thing is like move quickly, break stuff, iterate, cutting edge sort of thing. But if we're talking about a global, whatever narrative we come up with at the time, store of value, monetary layer, premium gold, anti-currency debasement, Michael Saylor, Plan B, stock to flow thing, I'm fine with it being a rock, basically.
Yes.
What do you think about?
I agree. I think I mean I like Bitcoin as it is, but I also like just kind of like a few experiments here and there.
Yes, exactly.
See if you can push it further. I mean, if it doesn't stick, it doesn't stick. But if you can make Bitcoin into something else or something better, and be my guest, right? It's not like, I mean, the weird thing with the maxis going so crazy over this, that I mean, Bitcoin doesn't have to be the be all end all thing, right? It's so weird to me, because at the end of the day, the whole thing is like an ideology driven thing, right? Not like, okay, Bitcoin has to go to infinity. If we get somewhere down the line with something in crypto, I mean, I think that's the change that, I mean, now going completely of everything, but I mean, it's basically a change that Satoshi would have wanted, right? You kind of change how money works, and do like a positive change. I mean, that'd be quite cool. And if we can achieve that by changing something in Bitcoin or not, like just in general experiment with crypto, I mean, that's a good thing in my book, and should be for Maxi as well, obviously. But they're so focused on the dollar value of their thing that they kind of forget about the ideology of it and just kind of go all in, like, okay, this has to be this and that and that. But I think in general, like, just like, let people try. And I mean, it doesn't seem like an attack to me. It's just a bunch of people kind of seeing what they can do with the technology at hand. And if that's going to break it, then it wasn't worth kind of being anything in the first place, right? Because I mean, if it's that easy to break it, I mean, well, it's just completely useless.
Yeah, good luck holding up to like hostile adversarial nation state and coordinated attacks if some pictures are going to make, you know, the tech.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I think it's quite bullshit, really. Like, let them do their thing, and I mean, if it's gonna break it, well, then it's gonna break it.
Yes.
It's just how it is.
And they're just using the protocol as intended, right? Like they're paying the fees.
Yes.
That's
I mean, if they weren't
seems fairly
paying fees,
straightforward.
if they were using like a bug and then they were like advertising against fixing it, I mean, that's one thing, right?
Yes.
But it's not. It's just like using it, seeing what they can do with it, and at the end of the day, we'll see if it amounts to anything or not.
Yes.
Probably not. I mean, why would you want to have NFTs on Bitcoin if you can have them on ETH? But I mean, who knows? I'd be glad to kind of see Bitcoin kind of get a revival of sorts and be used a lot. Because,
Yes, people using it, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's kind of been sad, right? You just kind of buy a bunch of Bitcoin and you put it somewhere and you ignore it, and then people get worried that in 100 years there's not gonna be a minor reward. Like, how fucking sad is that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're like, there's so little change that people were actually worried about 100 years from now, because they were like, oh, it's just always gonna be the same.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think
already
that's
ossified.
yeah, and that's not really something that a currency like that you want to see in a currency, right? So if you want to have like gold and that's always going to be the same, be my guest, right? But a lot of these maxis are like, Bitcoin is the currency as well. It's not only gold, it's the currency, is like whatever, all of this stuff. And then it's like, well, you can either have it or you don't. You cannot like just be like, I want to have it be everything, but I also don't want people to do anything with it. And it's like, it just doesn't really work.
Yes, completely.
But I'm
Absolutely
not
agree.
an expert in all of this, right? Like the whole like maxi whatever thing is just kind of weird to me.
Yes.
They kind of seem just very odd. Just as a trader, I'm just happy with people
Oh,
kind of
man.
pushing something forward, right? And the only way to kind of push something forward is by trying things and making mistakes, maybe, but then fixing them and then going further. If you just let it be a pet rock, I mean, cool, but that's not going to make anything better necessarily.
Yeah. And thankfully, as a trader, speculator, investor, or even someone who really loves Bitcoin, you don't need to pick one over the other. They're not mutually exclusive in some way. You just own both, right? You can shift around your ratios, or own more of one than the other, but you don't have to make some sort of like ideological commitment that if I like Bitcoin, I have to hate ETH and vice versa. I can't believe we're still having these discussions in 2023.
Yeah.
It's a bit mental. Final bit. Well, I mean, we basically covered this. Binance bites back against Forbes report claiming transfer of 1.8 billion in collateral. So basically, it's always just like there just seems to be a pattern of like Forbes and Reuters come out swinging against Binance. CZ tweets number 4. Binance fires back. The regulators and politicians get horny over the headlines, especially post FTX, and just start asking questions about Binance. It's very tiresome. I want to see more Bitslato discussion and less Binance. I think they're using Binance to distract us from the real
From the
story.
big things, yeah.
Yeah, but what do I know?
I thought CC bought Forbes to prevent this from happening. Like,
Worst ROI investment ever, right?
oh yeah. Well, I mean that didn't really work out. I don't actually like. I have no idea how that deal looked like, but I seem to remember something of that sort, right? I'm not tripping.
Yeah. I remember that headline. Don't remember the terms of the deal or even if it went through. But yeah, in
Yeah.
any case, it's the classic adversaries. But yeah, it's been like, look, I think Binance survived the important part, which is essentially the bank run at the bottom. No
Yes.
coincidence there, by the way, right? Like,
It's
I think
usually like
that was the biggest test. It was like what 10 billion in outflows. I might have made up that number, but it was something massive in terms of the attempted bank run that was happening at the end of last year. And I think if you survive that, everything else is it can still be bad, but it won't be it can't be as bad, right? Like the BUSD thing, the market absorbed like decently well because it wasn't like some disaster scenario. They're just kind of winding it down. But I just feel like in terms of stress tests, like you've had the bank run, you've had the stable coin essentially getting unwound, and we're not at zero, so
Yes.
that's good, I guess. This is the extent of my cope, Dom. I'm like everything is breaking, but it's not breaking completely, which is bullish. It's like, oh my god.
I mean, yeah, but I agree.
But
Like we had,
there's legit a stress test, right? Like I passed two big stress tests, and that's worth something at least.
I mean, it's the best way to kind of judge whether something's healthy or not. FTX didn't survive the stress test. Binance did. Obviously, doesn't have to mean that everything's okay, but from my judgment, I think it should. I think on the Binance front, I mean, they would have to colossally fuck something up.
Yes.
But then again, I would never advocate for you to have all your money on an exchange. I think it's stupid. I think you should just be on an exchange to trade and nothing else. If you're holding your money on an exchange, probably not the best idea in the world. You just want to do your business, get in, get out, and do your thing. Unless it's something that you 100% trust, which you probably shouldn't. But
It's not a
then
bank
again,
account.
no, it's not. Then again, like it's kind of a shitty situation, right? Because holding crypto as well, like for someone that doesn't really do crypto, like we do it full time, right? So it's kind of like second nature to us. And even I am still scared. Every time I move money,
Oh mate, yeah.
I'm like worried that it's gonna be gone. Every time I bridge somewhere, I'm like, okay,
Goodbye.
yeah, and this is the thing, right? This is a thing for experienced traders. It's a thing for experienced users. Now, if I told my mom like, "Hey, don't hold your money on an exchange," it'd be gone the next day, right?
Right, yeah.
Um,
But she'd have an
so
animated Bored Ape, which is pretty cool. So
yes, so like that's the thing. This kind of like this whole like FTX debacle, especially given it happened in 2022,
yes.
not in good old Mount Gox times where everything was still janky, is a really really big deal, and it's really really shitty, right? Because it's kind of ruined a lot of the trust that has been built in the last few years. In like at least the bigger players, right? Because I mean, the small exchanges, like, do you want to necessarily have your money on KuCoin or not? I mean, that's arguable, right? It's not gone down yet, and it also had a bank run, I think. But like that's pretty easy for everyone to see that that should not necessarily be something that you're doing. Not necessarily because I distrust KuCoin or anything, but it's just a smaller exchange. And then you're like looking at Coinbase and like, oh, maybe I can hold some money there, stake it or whatever. And with the FTX thing happening, that's just kind of that trust's been shaken, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because the good thing is like you shouldn't be trusting all of these players. There's a reason why crypto exists, is basically to not trust others, but also like it's really bad because most people that want to have exposure to crypto have no idea what the fuck they're doing, and the best way to kind of hold their stuff is just for them on an exchange or like somewhere where they can just leave it.
Which is nowhere,
but-
apparently.
Yeah, and now it's nowhere. Like you cannot put it anywhere. Like you put it on chain, you put it like in your wallet, you lose your keys, right? You put it just in a hot wallet or something. You click on a link, it's gone. Like there's so many ways to kind of get wrecked on crypto that I think that keeps a lot of people away, and it's not good. It's a little bit of a
Yeah, it's really
a
tough.
shitty situation.
And
Yeah.
you don't even, like, there are different risks, right? Like, you might think, oh, well, for example, Coinbase is a publicly listed company, and I think that should give you some degree of security, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, there's, like, platform risk. Like, what if it gets hacked? And we've seen big exchanges get hacked. And so you're not safe from that. So then you have to diversify from not just one exchange, and you go to others. But hey, this one isn't a publicly listed company. It's like a black box. So how do I, gauge my risk from this is a listed company but might have security issues? This one hasn't ever has never been hacked, but isn't a listed company, so it's a bit of a black box. So yeah, the whole thing is a clusterfuck. I look forward to the Zoomers in 2, 5, 10 years, whatever, just making fun of us for even having to think about counterparty risk, because by then they will have fixed it / solved it, and then we'll seem like archaic people like hiding their gold in some vault. But for now, it remains a problem for our industry. So
Yes.
So what you should do is just give me your money and.
You give it back with 20% interest.
Yes, exactly. You send me 1 ETH, I'll send you 2 back. I think that's all I've got, Don. What about you? What's keeping you awake at night? What's been stressing you out?
I mean, the only thing that's been stressing me is that I'm hungry. So I'll see if I can fix that in the next hour.
It's a good problem to have, man.
Yes.
I'm looking at these last 2 15-minute candles on the way down. I'm like, if hunger is the only thing, then you're in a good spot.
I mean, honestly, the funny thing is, like, it looks like a massive dump, but it's not really, right? Like, that's the thing. Whenever something goes sideways for a while, we kind of lose sight of it. It's really like, it's not the biggest scandal we've ever seen. It's not like we're trading below 20K, but it feels like the end of the world. But yes, if it turns into that, obviously start panicking.
It's like that shit post where you were like, "Oh, what dip are these bears talking about? I can barely see it on the chart." And I was like, "What if it's a grower, not a shower?" One of those. But yeah, that remains to be seen. Thankfully, we are very active on all of our channels, so subscribe if you haven't already. 50K coming up, at least for our sub number, if not the BTC price. We'll see which one leads and which one lags. Monday markets, Tuesday newsletter. I think we'll get that out because we skipped last week because there's nothing to say.
100%.
Wednesday, you just ask the duck if he's wrecked or how he knew it was the bottom or some other magical question. Which I asked him about his girlfriend. He seems to enjoy talking about his personal life on these live streams. The amount of times I had to press fast forward while watching your stuff, I've lost track, to be honest.
I mean, people only watch for that.
I know, that's the sad part, right? Like, I'm pretty sure if you and I pivoted to we turn our face cams on and we do like an entertainment show where we go through like crypto Twitter drama and beef and like people calling each other scammers and then reaction videos and shit like that, it would do super well. But I'm just not going to entertain that because I'm pretty sure I'd lose my sanity. Altcoin Thursdays also next week, which is just when you sell everything apparently. Like, you don't even need to watch the video, just see that thing go live and you press the red button and it's fucking outperformed me this year for all I know. So that's a thing. And yeah, we'll do this show again this time next week. Duck, thank you to our audience. Leave a like, comment, let us know something interesting for a change. We're going to talk to you for like an hour and a half and talk about relevant things. You can return us the favor with your favorite fact. And Don, hope you have a wonderful weekend and get back to your desk at manageable prices. I'll give you that much.
No, please do.
Awesome. That's all from us, and see you next week.